Welcome back, everybody, to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going all the way back to the end of the Civil War, to Appomattox and the surrender of the Army of Northern Virginia.
Right.
Now, most people, I think, when they think about Appomattox, they think of, Lee signing the surrender and Grant accepting it, and that's it, right?
That's kind of the popular image.
But, of course, it was so much more than that.
Yeah, of course.
And we've got a book here to help us unpack all the different layers.
Okay.
It's called Appomattox, Lee's Surrender and the End of the War.
Awesome.
And it really gets into all the different, kind of human elements and the kind of the day-to-day happenings.
The nitty-gritty.
Leading up to the surrender and then what happened afterwards.
Yeah, yeah.
So we've got to remember, first of all, just to set the stage, that by April 1865, the Confederacy was on its last legs.
They were. Richmond had fallen. You have Lee's army was completely exhausted. They were hungry. They were constantly being pursued by Grant. And Grant was absolutely relentless. He was not going to stop.
Yeah, it's almost like you can feel the walls closing around Lee at this point.
The noose is tightening.
So what was his plan at this point?
So Lee, he was a brilliant strategist. And even at this late stage in the war, he devises a plan to try and break out of Grant's encirclement and race west to try and link up with Johnston's army down in North Carolina.
Okay.
And their idea was to basically establish a defensive line along the Roanoke River.
Okay.
And try and, make a last stand, really.
Yeah.
But it was a gamble. It was a huge gamble, and it was pretty much doomed from the start.
Yeah, I mean, you can just imagine the pressure on him.
Yeah.
I mean, to know that the fate of the Confederacy rested in his hands.
Yeah.
It must have been just an unbelievable weight.
It would have been.
So the book describes how they arrived at Amelia Courthouse expecting supplies, right?
Right.
They were desperate for food and ammunition.
Yeah, they were starving.
But when they got there, there was nothing.
Nothing.
Can you imagine the disappointment?
It was a huge blow to their morale.
Yeah.
And of course, it gave the Union Army even more time to catch up.
Right.
Because Lee's army was forced to spend a whole day foraging for food in the surrounding countryside.
Just to stay alive.
Just to stay alive, yeah.
And then, of course, came the Battle of Sailor's Creek.
Yes.
Just a few days later.
Just a few days later. And this was...
this was on April 6th.
April 6th, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Brutal battle.
Oh, yeah. I mean, almost 7,700 Confederate soldiers.
Yeah, that's right. 7,700 men.
Were captured there.
Either captured or surrendered.
Yeah. That's a quarter of their remaining army.
That's right. I mean, essentially, they lose a quarter of their fighting force.
And they also lost several key generals.
Yeah.
Including Richard Ewell, the lieutenant general.
Yeah.
So you can imagine how that affected the morale of the soldiers.
It was a devastating blow.
I mean, that must have been a crushing defeat.
It was. It really was. The Confederate dream was slipping away at this point. It really was.
But Lee pressed on.
He did.
He set his sights on Appomattox Station, where he believed there was another supply train waiting.
Right. They needed those supplies desperately.
But once again, things did not go as planned.
No, they did not. On April 8th, you have Union cavalry, led by George Armstrong Custer.
Custer.
That's right, that Custer.
Wow.
Intercepted those vital supplies.
Wow.
They captured the trains, and they even burned 3 of them.
Oh, my gosh.
Imagine the desperation of those Confederate soldiers.
Yeah.
They were starving, exhausted, and now their last hope of resupply was gone.
Yeah, you can really feel the momentum shifting at this point. And the Confederate hopes are just dwindling with every setback.
Absolutely.
But the fighting wasn't over.
No.
On the morning of April 9th, 1865, there was one final clash that really sealed the Confederacy's fate.
Yeah. Lee, thinking he was only facing lightly armed cavalry, launched a surprise attack.
Wow.
Hoping to break through to Lynchburg.
Okay.
What he didn't realize was that the cavalry was backed up by 2 full corps of Union infantry.
Oh, wow.
It was a complete mismatch.
Wow, so it was a trap.
It was a trap.
Wow.
And this was really the moment when Lee realized that surrender was inevitable.
Yeah, the book describes that moment as just, a moment of profound realization for him.
Right.
He realizes that it's over.
Yeah.
What a heavy weight that must have been. To know that all those years of fighting
Yeah.
All the lives lost had led to this moment.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine.
Yeah. And it's interesting, though.
Because even in this moment of defeat,
yeah,
we really see the character of both Lee and Grant shine through.
That's right.
You know, when we look at the surrender terms that Grant offered,
right,
they were surprisingly generous.
They were incredibly lenient for the time.
Yeah.
No imprisonment for the Confederate soldiers. Officers were allowed to keep their sidearms,
Wow.
their horses.
Yeah.
And crucially, Grant provided rations for those starving Confederate soldiers. Yeah. So, you know, I think you really have to ask yourself, could this have been the turning point towards healing a nation torn apart by war?
I mean, it's amazing to think that just a few days earlier, they were shooting at each other.
They were literally trying to kill each other.
And they were sharing rations.
Sharing rations. Trying to bring the country back together.
So that brings us to the surrender scene itself, which took place in the parlor of a house owned by Wilmer McLean.
Right. And now this is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Because this is the same Wilmer McLean who owned a house near Manassas Junction.
Oh, wow.
Where the first battle of the Civil War took place, the first battle of Bull Run.
Oh, my goodness.
So this man, Wilmer McLean, he had the dubious honor of having the war begin on his property.
Oh, my goodness.
And end on his property.
And what are the chances of that?
I mean, talk about bad luck. Right?
Yeah, unbelievable.
Yeah.
And the descriptions of the two generals in that moment are so fascinating.
Right.
You know, Lee arrived in his immaculate dress uniform.
Yeah.
Grant shows up in this mud-splattered field uniform.
Yeah.
You really get a sense of their different personalities just from that one little detail.
Yeah. It speaks volumes, doesn't it, about their approach to this moment?
Yeah.
And I think it really humanizes them, which is something we often forget when we're talking about these giant figures of history.
It's easy to forget that they were real people, you know, with flaws and anxieties and all the same things that we deal with.
And they were also exhausted by this point in the war.
Yeah.
Both of them.
So it's a good reminder that Appomattox was so much more than just a military surrender, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It was a moment of profound humanity amidst all the unimaginable loss and suffering.
Right.
And really a step towards healing a nation.
It was. It was the first step.
That had been torn apart by war.
And a long road to healing and reconciliation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's amazing to think about all the different elements that went into shaping that moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one of the things that I found fascinating about this book is it talks about the surrender documents themselves.
Okay.
And how they were actually written by Ely Parker.
Oh, wow.
Who was a Seneca Native American.
I did not know that.
Yeah, isn't that amazing?
Yeah, that's fascinating.
And there's this incredible exchange between Lee and Parker.
Okay.
Where Lee remarks to Parker, "It is good to have one real American here."
Wow.
And Parker, without missing a beat, replies, "Sir, we are all Americans."
Wow. Even in this moment of, you know, such division, the idea of a unified nation is still there.
Yeah.
It's powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting, too, because, you know, after the surrender was signed, Grant actually forbade his men from celebrating the Confederate surrender.
That's amazing.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
You know, because you think about it, these men, just days before, were, you know, sworn enemies.
Right.
Locked in this brutal conflict.
Yeah, a fight to the death, essentially.
And now, Grant is telling them to see each other as countrymen.
To lay down their arms and embrace peace. Yeah. That's a powerful message.
Yeah, and the book talks about this really poignant scene that took place on April 12th, which was the formal ceremony of surrender, where 28,000 Confederate soldiers marched in to stack their arms.
Yeah.
You know, can you imagine what that must have been like?
Oh, just the weight of defeat, the uncertainty, and yet also maybe some relief that the fighting was finally over.
Yeah.
I mean, for both sides, this war had been going on for 4 long years.
Yeah, and so much had been lost.
So much death and destruction.
So much.
Yeah, it's hard to even fathom.
And the book highlights the actions of Union Brigadier General Joshua Chamberlain,
Okay.
who was chosen to oversee the surrender ceremony.
Right.
And he made a really interesting decision
Okay.
that I think speaks volumes about the spirit of reconciliation that was emerging at this point.
Okay, what did he do?
So Chamberlain, recognizing the bravery and resilience of the Confederate soldiers,
Right.
ordered his men to salute their defeated foes.
Wow. That's incredible.
As they marched past.
Wow.
You know, put yourself in Chamberlain's shoes for a moment.
Yeah.
He's staring down these defeated soldiers. And he makes this decision that some might have seen as controversial.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But he does it anyway.
He does it anyway because he sees their shared humanity. He sees that they're all Americans at the end of the day.
Right.
Yeah.
Chamberlain himself described it as the passing of the dead.
Wow.
You know, this somber recognition of the immense sacrifice on both sides.
Right.
So, you know, as we look back on Appomattox, you know, what do you think is the lasting legacy?
That's a great question.
What does it represent for us today?
I think Appomattox stands as a symbol of so much.
Yeah.
You know, the end of a devastating war,
Right.
the beginning of a long and difficult process of healing, and the resilience of the human spirit in the face of just unimaginable loss.
Yeah.
It's a story that continues to resonate, don't you think?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it makes you think, you know, what if things had been different?
Yeah.
What if the surrender terms had been harsher?
What if there had been no ceremony, no salute, just a cold, transactional end to the fighting?
Right.
Would the wounds of war have healed as quickly?
Yeah.
Would the process of reconciliation have been as smooth?
Right.
Or would it have been fraught with, you know,
Yeah.
resentment and lingering bitterness?
It's impossible to know for sure.
Right.
But it's certainly something to think about.
It is, yeah.
It's fascinating to think about how different things might have been.
It really is.
You know, for the country.
Yeah.
If those decisions had been made differently.
Yeah. So as we look back on Appomattox, what do you think are the key takeaways for us? Well, I think Appomattox reminds us that even in the face of profound division and seemingly insurmountable challenges, there's always hope for healing and unity.
Yeah.
It might be a long and difficult process, but it's a journey worth taking.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a powerful message of resilience and the potential for reconciliation.
And it reminds us that even in the darkest of times, compassion and understanding can pave the way for a brighter future.
It's a story about the past, but it also has so much relevance for us today.
It really does.
Doesn't it?
Yeah. Appomattox is not just a story about the past. It's a story that continues to shape our present and our future.
Yeah.
It invites us all to reflect on the complexities of history, the power of forgiveness, and the enduring hope for a more perfect union.
Well, that about wraps it up for our deep dive into Appomattox.
It was a fascinating discussion.
A moment that marked not only the end of a war, but the beginning of a nation's journey toward reunification.
Absolutely.
We hope this exploration has given you a new perspective on this pivotal event.
Yeah.
And maybe sparked some thought-provoking questions about our own time.
It certainly has for me.
So until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.
I'll see you next time.
See you later.